Alright, it is International Dark Sky Week, which is putting light pollution on everybody's mind. Now, in today's world, it is pretty much inevitable that you're going to need to have some kind of screen to control your gear. Whether you're using a PC, a laptop, a tablet, or your phone, all of that gear does require some kind of external control. Now, to protect your night vision and the night vision of those around you if you're at a star party, you need to make everything as red and as dim as possible. In this video, we are going to go over how to set your device to red on all common operating systems and devices. Now, before we get started, there are a few things to keep in mind. In the days past, you used to have to put a sheet of red cellophane or some other kind of film over your stuff. That's not necessarily the case anymore. Now most operating systems have some kind of night mode or filter built into them. But something about the film thing for DSLRs, I haven't seen one that has some kind of night mode on it. If you have one, let me know down in the comments below. But you might still have to use a little piece of red film just to keep the screen red. And yes, even with touchscreens, putting that film over it still does work. Now for desktops, laptops, phones, and tablets, you can make the screen very red just based on what the operating system can do. But keep in mind that some manufacturers are better than others at making it a very deep, contrasty red. Some of them it's a little bit more pink or more orange. So just keep that in mind that it might not always be perfect because your device might not support it. So with that being said, if you're building a computer to be your astrophotography rig and you're gonna have it out at star parties, something you're gonna wanna keep in mind is the monitor. When you buy your monitor, going with an OLED or OLED style is the best. And the reasoning for that is because when there are black pixels on the screen, those pixels are actually completely off. They are not lighting up anything. So if it is black, it is off. But the downside is that those monitors are pretty pricey compared to IPS, TN, and VA style monitors. So if you can't afford an OLED, then go with a VA style. That one has the best contrast for at night, and the backlight of the monitor won't be glowing as much as the other styles. All right, diving into our first operating system, we'll go with the most common first, and that is Windows. All right, so the first thing you're gonna do is go into Settings, and then we're gonna go to System, and then Display, and we're gonna see this screen here. The next thing we are going to do is click on Night Light Settings, which should be right underneath the preview box here. Now what we want to do is turn this on so we can see what our monitor looks like. And then you want to set it all the way to the right. And that should turn your screen fairly deep red. Now, once that's set, you don't have to leave it on for now for the rest of the setup. You can actually just make sure the bar is slid all the way to the right and then turn it back off. Now, for scheduling, say you're at a star party, you can have it scheduled to do sunset to sunrise if you have location services turned on your device, or if you know what time sunset and sunrise are, just set those hours and it'll automatically turn red, say just as it's getting dark, and turn back to normal just as it's getting light in the morning. And to save a little bit of time in this video, almost every single operating system has the ability to schedule this. But in the interest of saving a little bit of time, I'm not going to repeat it every time. Now, having red mode is good in and of itself, but we can take it even further. For example, right now on my screen, everything's bright white, and when I turn on the red mode, it is just a big red screen, so that's spilling a lot of light into the field for others around me. Now, we can also change the theme to make all the white stuff black, and make all the text white, and make all the colored icons black and white, so that way when everything's red, it is as monochrome as possible, and then once everything's dimmed, it is as dim as possible, and your neighbor in the next lot over will actually be very happy. So in order to do the theme, we go back out to Settings, and then we go to Personalization. Now from here, there are a few different things you're gonna want to do. First thing is, before you go to change anything, go to Themes on the left there, and then make sure you save your current theme. Name it whatever you want, just save it as it is, so that way when you're not out shooting astrophotography, if you like how things look right now, you can put it back to the way it was. So there we go. I have my main theme saved. And I just realized my mouse pointer thing was off, so I'll turn that on for you. The next thing we're going to do is on the left here, we're going to go back up to background, and then we're going to set it to solid color, and then just set it to black. That way, if it's just your background visible, it is completely black. Now, back in themes, a couple other things we can do is, if you want to, you can change your mouse color and actually set it to black here. But just remember that when you do this and everything else is black, it might be a little bit hard for you to see the mouse pointer. But you can also set it to a larger size in here, so that way when it's here, and I'll even leave it like this for the rest of this video, but put it back to white, it'll make it easier for you to see what you're doing in the dark. So if you want to change the mouse around, that's your call. Okay, and with the mouse being saved as it is, the next thing to do in themes is set the color. And in the color screen, we're going to set the default app mode to dark. And we see that that turns everything nice and dark. And the other color down here, the Windows color, so that's when you hit the start button, I have mine set to black, and I'm not going to change it. But if yours is a different color, you'll want to set it to either black or red. And that'll make the background for your start menu stuff darker color. Now that we have this, the next thing to do is to make the contrast a little bit better. You're going to find that even with just this, it might be a little bit harder to read at night. Even though the sample text up here against a black background is kind of easy to read, where there's actual colors built into your programs, it might be a little bit harder to see. So we're going to boost the contrast. And to do that, we're going to go up into the right here and go to high contrast settings. Now for here, all we have to do is turn it on, and we see that absolutely everything else that wasn't high contrast before is now high contrast. And make sure the theme is high contrast black, and then the selected text color, we want to make that red. So for the hex color, you can do FF0000, and that'll make everything red. And what it'll do is, over here, how this is currently blue, it's going to change that to red. The other thing here is leave the text white, so that way when the screen is tinted red, it's easier to read. And you can leave the other two colors alone. But now that we're done with that, we can go ahead and hit apply. And then I'm just going to name this red mode. HC. So that way I know that this is my high contrast setting for red mode. And now we see that that color changed to red, and there's a few other things that are green. Now we have one last thing to set up, and that is a color filter. What we're going to do is, how my Chrome icon down here still has some color in it, we're going to turn that into monochrome. And that's going to make the green a little bit easier to see when everything is red. So to do that, we just go to color filters, we make sure that grayscale is checked, and then we just turn it on. And now we see that everything is black and white, and everything that was green, if we go back to high contrast, we see that it's still easy to read. And with this red, it's still easy to read here. Now, for both high contrast and color filters, there is a keyboard combination you can use to toggle those. And if you want to memorize them, they are right here, right below each setting. So for color filters here, it is Windows, Control, and C to turn this on. And for high contrast, it is Alt, Left Shift, and Print Screen. And those will toggle those on and off, so that way you don't have to come find these settings every time. So if I were to hit Alt, Left Shift, and Print Screen, it turns off. And that little sound you heard was the screenshot sound. But I still have color filters on, so everything is still black and white. But I'm going to go ahead and turn this back on. And when you turn it back on, it will prompt you, which is fine. There are other programs like AutoHotkey and AutoIt where you can set up one keyboard combination to turn everything on. If you know how to use it, I highly recommend it. I'm not going to go over that in this video. There are plenty of great guides out there about AutoHotkey and changing your Windows settings. So there is one last thing you can do, because there is no keyboard combination built into Windows for dark mode. There is a program called Easy Dark Mode, and it is completely free. Now you'll want to go to this website here, wintools.info. That is the official download, and you can just go ahead and download it, and you'll see all this other stuff here. The one we want is Easy Dark Mode, and you just click on the download button. Then all you have to do is just double click to run. Windows will yell at you. You say more info and run anyway. It's a rather small program, and there's not a whole lot to it. But then now you can go to your theme here and you can say auto, light or dark. So you can set it back to the light mode like we had it earlier, and it'll change once you're out of high contrast mode. And you can set a hotkey to toggle back and forth. Now the last thing here is to go back and turn on night light in settings. So that is back at home, system, display, night light. And then you can just turn it on now. The last step to do, and this is across all devices, is dim your monitor. So whatever monitor you have, if you don't know how to dim it, check out your manufacturer's manual and just dim it as far as it can possibly go where you can still see what you're doing. And there you go. You're not blinding anybody in the field with you. Now for all devices, again, they all have the same setting for brightness. So when you get done doing the setup part of it, the last step is dimming. All right, and this is awesome on how well your eyes will be preserved. And now we're gonna move over to Android. Now that we are on my phone, all we have to do is go into settings and then down towards the bottom, look for accessibility. From there, we wanna go to visibility enhancements and then color lens. Now from here, you just turn it on and make sure the opacity is set as far to the right as it can go, because if you have it all the way to the left, it's not really gonna do much. And make sure the color is set to red. For me, the way that this looks on this screen, and I'm actually gonna show you this on the camera, just in case, is the contrast kind of sucks. So I would kind of recommend, if your phone looks like that, or your tablet, turn on high contrast mode as well. And you can go back out to visibility enhancements and just go to high contrast fonts, and that'll just make things a little bit easier to read. And you can do some color adjustments to it as well. But like I said, remember that some versions of Android might not have any of this. So the tablet I use for the ASI Air actually doesn't have that in the accessibility menu. I have to use a third-party app called Night Screen Filter. That's the best one that I've found so far. Twilight's okay too, but Night Screen Filter is pretty much the one you want. And then after that, just dim the screen. Now, one thing to note about Android and Apple for that matter is that in the accessibility settings for some devices, depending on the model, there is a way to set it up to where you can toggle it pretty easily. And I'll show you that on iPhone. Now for Android, it is possible, but my phone can't do it, so I can't show you. But the menu options are pretty similar. All right, now that we're done with Android and Windows, we're gonna shift over to Apple products for a minute. Now for Apple devices, I'm looping all major versions together, especially if you're using newer versions, because the steps are pretty much the same. And that is across Mac laptops and desktops, and iPhones and iPads. The steps are pretty similar. All right, so for Mac OS, while this gets loaded in, I am using Monterey, so it's a older version. And for phones, I'll be using iOS 12. That way you know what it looks like in the older version. But one thing to note right off the bat is that at least for the phones and iPads, Apple does red way better than Android does. When it's red, it is a deep red that is, when set to the dimmest, it looks great. But okay, now we are in here, and the main thing we do, just like iPads and phones and all that, we just go to settings or system preferences, as it were, here in Mac. And then again, on all of them, we'll go to accessibility, and then we will go to display. Now in here, all we do is go to color filters, make sure the color is set to red, and the intensity is set all the way to the right, and we just hit enable color filters. Okay, so in here on my iPad, again, we go to settings in general, accessibility, display accommodations, color filters, and we just turn that on. And for phones and iPads, you want to set the intensity and the hue all the way to the right and make sure color tint is selected. And then it looks very deep red, so yeah. The other thing we can do to help out just a little bit is back out, and then we'll go to general. In general, this is where you pick your theme, so you'd want to set it to dark, so that way everything is dark. And so if you want an accent color, that's your call, but honestly, I would leave it off. But beyond that, You just dim your screen. Now, real quick, the other thing on the iPad you can do, or iPhone, is back out to where you selected color filters and then just go to invert colors and then click smart invert. And that makes everything a deep black and just the red text. And when you minimize everything, everything is a lot darker. Okay, the last thing that you can do, and I'm showing you this on my iPad, and then I'll show you a screenshot of the setting on an iPhone. Back in accessibility, if you scroll down and you go to touch accommodations, in here, there is a selection called back tap. And for back tap, you can pick double or triple tap. The choice is yours, but I would recommend triple tap so you don't accidentally turn on red mode. But you can choose it and then scroll down to color filters. Since you just set up your color filter, it'll already use red mode. Now, when you tap the phone where the fingerprint reader is, it'll turn on red mode or turn it off if it's already on. That's it. That's how you set the red mode on an iOS device. Now, granted, I think for control, you're not going to be using a Mac, but you might be using an iPad or an iPhone with an ASI Air. And you'll definitely want to make it as red as possible. Now, before we get into the last operating system, I do have a question for you. If you already have your system set up and you've already been to star parties, what methods are you using to keep things nice and dim for your neighbor? All right, the last and the least used of the bunch is Linux, and we're going to go over that. Now, there are still ways you can control your gear using Linux, so we're at least going to go over it. Now, just like Android, there are many different versions, so the steps might be different, but they might be similar. For this example, I'm going to be using Ubuntu. All right, and the first thing we'll do is go to settings. And now that we're in here, we want to scroll down to displays. All right, and just like in Windows, there is a nightlight option. So you can set it to a schedule if you want, but you want to set it to more warm. The warmer it is, the better. Simple enough to turn on. That's it for that. Now, the next thing you can do is set your theme, which is under appearance. Now for here, there is a baked-in dark mode. All you have to do is set it, and there you go. Unfortunately, at least for this version of Ubuntu, if I go down to universal access where you would turn on high contrast mode, this version of Ubuntu, when you turn that on, it actually just disables light mode, but it does make the icons a little bit easier to see. It is a little bit annoying because if you set high contrast mode on, you can't have dark mode on, which is pretty annoying. But turning on high contrast mode first will just make all the icons black and white. The last thing to do if you really want to do that is change your background and just save like a straight black picture. That way your background is changed. All right, that is it. That is how you make Windows, Android, Apple devices, and Linux red and dim and dark. Don't forget to do that last step of dimming your monitor or tablet or phone after you get done changing everything to red. If you found this video helpful, please do like, comment, and then maybe consider subscribing. I want to thank you for watching. Clear skies.